All right, everyone, welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I have an amazing guest here for you guys. You may know Josh Smith. He's kind of made some ripples in social media, in the hunting world, which he said he didn't want to talk about knives and hunting or any of that stuff. So we won't. No, I'm just kidding. We're definitely going to dive into those things. I've got a lot of questions here for Josh. I know you guys have asked me a couple things, those that knew that Josh was going to be on the podcast, and it was a blast being up in Montana for the first time. I think I was a little spoiled. I went up there for the first time to your shop. I've never
Oh,
been to
that's
Montana
cool.
before. So now we're looking at properties and we'll be moving to Montana soon.
Get in line.
uh, right. Right. Exactly. No, but so Josh Smith, for those that don't know who Josh is, I don't know what rock you're hiding under, but Josh he was the youngest person to accomplish Master Smith at the age of 19, and we'll walk through what that means. But there's only 170 something in the world now, and at the time there was only like 70 or 80 in the entire world that had been able to accomplish that. So he knows what he's doing. He loves this craft. He has ever since he was a kid. And I mean, other than that, Josh, who are you? Introduce yourself. I've gone a little bit into it, but who are you?
Yeah, I mean, you covered it in a very nice way, nicer than I would about myself. I'm as far as who I am, I think I'm just kind of a regular guy. I yeah, I grew up doing excavation. My parents owned an excavation business. Um, I became a lineman at one point, so I was a journeyman lineman. Worked on power lines, a knife maker, a dad, husband. I like to hunt. I like to have fun. Probably tell too many, few inappropriate jokes. Uh, I kind of just a regular guy. Love hunting. Love being outdoors. I've got four kids. They're in 4-H and sports. I used to coach a lot of their sports teams and stuff when they were younger. I've turned that over to the junior high and high school coaches at this point. But that's kind of why I say like regular guy. I think I'm like a lot of us that do a lot of different things or whatever. But uh, proud to be an American. Love my country. Support the military. All the things that I guess I just kind of figure person should be.
Exactly. No, it's awesome. Yeah, you pretty much define that. I mean, you're a dad, you're a blue collar worker. And now you've taken this passion of yours and turned it into something amazing. And so, just to kind of talk a little bit here about, so we went up to the grand opening. You opened up your new shop, which is amazing. It's such an awesome. I'm jealous of your podcast studio personally. I didn't understand most of the other machines you had in the shop, but it just looks like a great place that you have built, and obviously you envisioned it, and everything was placed very specifically for a purpose. And then my wife, who's not into blades, not really into hunting, she came along and she was blown away by the quality of people that you've surrounded yourself with. And I think her growing up experience with hunters was kind of the weekend warrior, lots of blood and guts and stuff that she wasn't interested in. And going to that event and just sitting down, it was funny because we sat down with, I want to say it was Greg, Deadeye Gregory, I think on Instagram is
Oh,
what.
Gary.
Gary, sorry, yeah.
Yep.
So Gary, we sat down with Gary. Happened to run into him in the line while we were getting dinner before the event started,
Just a terrible
and
guy. Yeah,
I
just a
know,
terrible
right?
guy. Hard to be
But
around.
like he wasn't, he didn't come off as this smug individual, but he just kind of told his story, melded really well with my wife in that conversation. We sat down with him and then talked the entire time during dinner. And then when you brought him up because he was a longtime customer, brought your family out for a hunt, just an amazing individual. And my wife's jaw just dropped. She was like, did I put my foot in my mouth during that conversation? Like she was so, at that point, she was so worried about it. But there were so many people in that room that you've surrounded yourself with that have been drawn to your work as well, that it blew her away. That I think that was the one thing that she won't stop talking about that trip was just
Yeah.
the quality of people that were there. So kudos to you and great job with that.
No, it's cool that you guys recognize that, and that's it's the thing I'm most blessed with and the thing that I'm most appreciative of with this company. I always say my favorite part of running this company is the people. I've said it on other podcasts. I've said it just, at shows, and, people ask me what your favorite part is and whatnot. And it's always the people. And I'm not sure how I got so fortunate with that. I mean, I didn't know any of the people that were in that room 2 years ago, quite frankly. I mean, maybe 10 out of the 200. There were a few people I introduced or brought up that had been collectors of mine before. A few friends that were there that have kind of been around, but everyone in that room I've met in the last 18 months, really, to 2 years. And if I'm really not good at a lot of things, but it seems like one thing that I've been pretty good at in my life is like judge of just people and character when I meet them. And um I, and I don't know why that is, or I don't know what it is. It seems like I can just kind of tell when somebody's a genuine person, and I'm attracted to those people. I don't really care. I don't care like how rich they are or how famous, or Gary's probably the least famous guy in that room. Uh, he's not a super rich guy. He's just a blue collar guy that makes a good living. Um, but he also maybe is the best hunter in that room from a totality of experience of the amount of hunting that he's done in his life. Uh, Back when he was like literally broke, and he would just drive up into the mountains after work and just stay for like 4 days in a row in his off days and sleep in a tent and take a bunch of spam with him. Like he's that guy that's like lived it and breathed it. But to your point, he's a guy that you could talk to for an hour and you wouldn't get that out of him. It takes a little bit. He would actually be a little bit of a hard podcast guest, because you'd have to kind of drag out of him just how cool he is and what he's done, you know, because he's so humble and he's so asking you about you instead of telling you about himself. Um, but yeah, that was my favorite part of the weekend as well, was just the incredible people that we have in this industry. Do I still have you?
Yeah. Yep, I'm here.
Okay, you're just freezing up on my screen, but as long as you got the audio.
Yeah.
Um, but to guys like you, quite frankly, that flew up to an event like this. You and I don't know each other well. We've met at a couple events. We've been around each other a little bit. But I don't know. There's just something about you, something about Jake, your buddy Jake, that you guys, when I met you down in Utah, I'm pretty sure we were standing right outside of the registration booth, and I'd come out of the like changing room area, bathroom, and I think that's actually where maybe I met you. I'm pretty sure that's where I met him. Um, but anyway, it was at that event, and there's just something about certain people that I don't really care how big their name is. You just kind of seem to resonate with certain folks.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that, and I didn't realize how recent Montana Knife Company had come about officially. You've got a really cool story with that as well. The fact that your mom had the foresight to have you mark that name register that name with Montana when you were 19. That's
Right.
amazing foresight. Say that again.
Yeah, I said yeah. Yep.
Oh yeah. So yeah, that's just amazing foresight that she had. And you've just again, I love that you bring that up. Judge of character. I mean, you really did surround yourself with people that you were in that room. Everyone was dressed, just kind of down to earth, blue collar, but there were people in there. It was literally like the founder of Under Armour, Kip,
Yeah.
and people like that NFL superstars that were in there, that weren't rolling up in a Lamborghini Rolls Royce. They were there because they wanted to support you and what you've done and how you've taken your passion and just flown with it. And it's just amazing to see that. And so, and again, I appreciate that. I do remember. It's funny that you meet so many people, and yet you remember that you met Jake and I at TAC, Utah, coming out of the bathroom like that. That's so cool. That just speaks again to kind of who you are, and that you really do enjoy people. That it's your passion. Um, so walk us through kind of for those that are new to knives. Um, don't know too much about it. What was the process of you becoming a master smith? Because you think a 19-year-old kid, you know, and I kind of joke about this too. I'm like, you kind of worry about kids that are obsessed with knives. You worry about kids that are
Yeah.
obsessed with knives and kids that are obsessed with guns and things like that. It's kind of
These
taboo to
days,
think that a
yeah, these days people tend to worry about that. But back when we were kids in the 80s and 90s, you ran around with BB guns and an old timer folding knife in your pocket, and that was just what you did. There was no worry whatsoever.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's, nowadays you kind of, a lot of people, it's a taboo topic. I mean, for you to have a kid like my son, what was it that we went to recently? We went to an event and we had to drive separate because I had to leave a little bit early. So my wife took the kids. Well, he's sitting there in a seat, kind of leaning forward, and there's something poking out of the back of his pants. And my wife's like, "What's that?" And lifts his shirt up, and he's got a little Lego gun that he's built. And he's like, "Well, Dad wasn't coming with us, so I needed to protect us."
Oh, that's funny.
Like,
Yeah,
and so he understands that at such a young age, right? And that's something that I encourage here in the house. It was just cool to see that. um we have to have talks about it and stuff, right? You can't walk around flashing it and stuff, but anyway,
yeah.
I think it's cool that your parents didn't quash that out of you. They supported that, and they sent you off to work with people that were building knives so you could learn. So walk the listeners through kind of what you were telling us at the grand opening, the process of becoming a master smith.
Yeah, a long ways away from becoming a mastersmith. Just in the beginning, like you say, I was a little league baseball player, um, and I look back at it now, uh, because I've coached my kids' sports. It actually is more amazing to me today than I never really thought about it. I just guess took it for granted the whole time. But my little league baseball coach, made knives, and he was showing knives to parents at practice, and I was super interested in them, as were my buddies. So I'm not quite sure how it worked out that he was okay with me coming up, but my folks bought me one of his knives for Christmas that year, and then he invited me to a shop to make one. And so for a little league baseball coach, parent, to invite a kid up to make a knife in his shop is really cool, because I haven't personally even done that with the teams that I've coached. But I would also say there probably hasn't been necessarily a certain kid that like came that was that interested, or maybe made me feel like I needed to. But it's a pretty amazing thing. And I'll probably get back to that later on in the conversation about how important that is. But I came up, I made a knife, made a couple knives, and then he pretty quickly, probably also to try to get rid of me, told me, "Hey, if you want to be a knife maker, you got to make knives in your own shop." So went off on my own. Not entirely. I mean, yeah, I had a lawn mowing business, and my dad let me start putting. I went and bought a knife grinder, put it in my dad's shop. Used my dad's drill press and some of his tools, and started roughly making knives. And then it started to become a thing, and I started making a mess out of my dad's shop. So ultimately, he enclosed like a little lean-to, open lean-to. He closed it in for me to work in and kind of kicked me out of his shop. And that became my knife shop really through high school. And, I would keep going to Rick's house. Rick Dunkerley is who taught me. I'd go to Rick's house, and he would critique the knives I was making. He would help me. Uh, Really the only thing that he really did back in those days on those knives was he would buff them, polish them at the very end, just buff them up after I had them ground and sanded, because a buffer is actually, even for, an adult male, a buffer is actually very dangerous to run. So for a kid, definitely no kids. I wouldn't allow any kid to use a buffer in my shop. Uh, and then he would help me sharpen them. and kind of taught me that skill. But he would critique them. I'd go back and try and make a better knife, and just kept that process going back and forth over the years. Uh, but he had the foresight when I was 12 to tell me that if this was something I really wanted to do, I should join the American Bladesmith Society, which makes you kind of an apprentice maker once you join. And so I started, I was doing that apprenticeship stuff. And then once you're an apprentice for 3 years, you're eligible to test for journeyman. Um, I tested for that and passed that when I was 15. And I'll kind of run through the process of that. But once I was a journeyman, uh, you have to be a journeyman for at least 2 years before you're allowed to test for master. Uh, and so I wasn't ready after 2 years. I was in high school. I wasn't making enough knives to improve my skills quick enough to that level. So I was just out of high school. It's part of the reason I probably flunked out of college. I was in college, and I did my master smith test at 19 and passed that. Uh, to become a journeyman or a master, it's a two-stage process. You have to make a performance blade because let's face it, no matter how pretty the knife is, its first job is it's a tool. So you have to make that knife perform. And so you make a 10-inch blade. That knife has to be able to chop a 1-inch rope in half in one chop, still shave hair. Well, in one chop, and then you have to go on and chop two 2x4s in half, as many chops as you want without resharpening. And at the end of that, that knife that has to still be able to shave hair off your arm. So a rope and two 2x4s and shave. And what that shows in that stage is that one, you can make a knife that's sharp right out of the box. And then number two, that it'll hold an edge pounding through like a board, through knots, all that stuff. And if the blade's too soft, that edge will deform. If the blade's too hard and too thin, it'll chip out. At that point, you have to take that same blade and you have to bend it 90 degrees in a vise without breaking it. And what that really shows is that you have control over your heat treat and you have the ability to make a blade that's hard, but also tough on the other side. And you have to have this balancing act. What it shows is that you have control and knowledge over the metallurgy and the heat treatment of that steel. Once you've done the performance part, and that has to be done in a mastersmith shop under his direction. You make the knife in your own shop, but you take it to his shop and you test under him. And if he has questions about your abilities, he also reserves the right to make you make a knife in front of him or forge a blade if he
Wow.
thinks that somehow you're gaming the system. Once you pass that, you have to go to Atlanta, Georgia, and present 5 knives to a panel of judges, and those 5 finished knives are just a testament to your ability to perform all the function of making a knife solidly and have really good fit and finish. So if I hand you a knife, there's no gaps and cracks between handle and guard or tang, and the blades are straight and everything looks nice. And at the journeyman level, those knives have to be really, really good. You're not supposed to have to achieve perfection, but should be real good.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the youngest in the world to do that at 15, and then the Mastersmith test is really the same test, but you have to do it with a Damascus blade. And your 5 knives you present have to be Damascus and have to. There's one knife in particular. It's called a Quillian dagger. That's very difficult to make. It just forces you to have to make something specific, kind of follow a plan. It's also a difficult knife to make, so it's easy. It's easy as a knife maker judging someone else to tell their skill level real quickly with that blade. So that and those knives have to. I hate to use the word perfect, right? Because every knife I've ever made, there's something with it that didn't go right, that I wasn't happy with, that maybe you can't see. So I don't know that I know that there's really no perfection in that, but they have to be as close to perfect as possible. And there's really no tolerance for, especially something that's somewhat glaring. If you let it get by, you clearly are not being honest with yourself, or you don't have the ability to even see that that's a problem. So anyway, it's kind of long winded, but that's the testing process. I will add that the term mastersmith, though it's part of our marketing, part of something I've capitalized off of and whatnot. I hesitate to say that you're really ever like truly a master, especially at 19 years old. Um, at 19, I really look at that as I passed the test. I performed to the standard they were looking for. But holy shit, I mean, there was so much that I didn't know. I'm way better knife maker today, and I really hope to be a lot better knife maker when I'm 60 than I am today. So like, I really think it shows a level of understanding of making knives, and really shows that you have the ability to really learn and grow from there. If the best knife you make is your Mastersmith test set for the rest of your career, you've really failed, you know. So um it's a little bit like being a number one draft pick or something when you're 19. Like, doesn't really mean that you've made it in life just yet.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's cool that you say that. There's so many things in life that I know you're not LDS or a Mormon, but I served a mission, and you send these 19-year-old boys throughout the world to preach the gospel of Christ, and there's so much that you learn there, but there's so many people that come back from that and they're like, those are the best 2 years of my life. And I'm like, if you don't build on that, then that's sad. If that's the best 2 years of your life when you're 60, still, like, you wasted your life, you know? And
Right.
so I love hearing that from you, saying that, you hope to continually progress. And I can say, the blades that I've got are just outstanding. Those that didn't or haven't seen my review on the Blackfoot and the Speed Goat that I put through this last year, I abused them. I didn't take care of them like you're supposed to. I didn't like beat them against rocks or anything, but I didn't, clean them or dry them out or anything like that. I let them rust. I let them do what they
Right.
needed to do naturally until they dulled out. And it took over 5 animals before, I'd realized that they were getting a little dull. So I'd say a little bit more than a 2x4 or a couple 2x4s in a rope. You've done an amazing job with your knives. And on top of that, I'm waiting for a folder Damascus because I I was never sold on Damascus steels because all the Damascus steels that I've encountered, they're weak. They kind of bend or they don't hold an edge very well. So when you were showing us at your shop that and talking about how you love Damascus steel and the cool things that you were doing, you made what'd you call it, a cinnamon roll? Is that what it was
Yeah,
called?
jelly roll.
Jelly roll. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that was awesome to see, and to hear that you love Damascus is kind of because I always like the way it looks, but I never liked the performance of Damascus steel. So it's cool to hear that to be a mastersmith, you have to build these durable blades that also look really nice. And that journey in and of itself. I mean, from what I heard, you could have been a mastersmith younger if you had made more knives, which blows me away still to think that you were at 15 a journeyman. And like, I look at my 15-year-old son, I'm like, I love him to death. And he's doing some amazing stuff with coding, but I can't imagine asking him to forge a blade like that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy. And that's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's cool. It was, looking back on it, it's definitely an accomplishment. I am probably more proud of like staying on task and chasing a dream. I mean, I have kids that are that age now, and it definitely takes a level of dedication most kids don't have. I will say, um, obviously, a ton of that credit goes to not just Rick, but some of the other guys as well that I was around in the knife making community that were teaching me, because you don't really get that good at anything that young without some real good direction. Because I don't think I was like some savant or anything like that. I just was probably not normal from the standpoint of as a hard worker and really dedicated and focused on that one thing. Um, uh, but I had an incredible group of middle aged guys around me that like took me under their wing and just and just showed me, you know, how to make knives, and they were encouraging somewhat. I'd say more than anything, they were really hard on me, which pushed me and at times made me want to quit because it didn't feel like you could ever satisfy them. But ultimately, they were super good guys, and I'm friends with them to this day. Uh, what I was getting at earlier with that coaching thing, it's the same way with the way I got into hunting. Um, my dad didn't hunt. We had an excavation business, and my dad worked really hard and whatnot, but like hunting wasn't really his thing. Um, and so just a local guy in town started taking me, like when I was like 12, took me bow hunting. And there were like three guys really locally that I was constantly asking questions about bows. And I remember my first like PSE Thunderflight bow. And there was a group of, yeah, probably 3 to 5 guys that I didn't hunt with all of them, but like I'd shoot with them, and I was always pestering them, asking them questions. And those guys got me into hunting and actually took me. And the point of saying that is those of us that live in communities now that hunt, and maybe you're a welder, maybe you're a home builder, whatever. If you have kids these days that are interested in asking you a lot of questions, you have no idea what kind of impact you can have on those kids by taking them at 12 years old and doing some hunting with them. I guarantee you nobody that was taking me hunting back then had any idea what I would eventually build in like a hunting knife brand, right? Um, and where I'd get to hunt, what I get to do, and that really was all because somebody was willing to take me hunting. So uh, I think opportunity is one of the biggest problems for kids these days, especially with where they live, right? Like I was fortunate. My parents had a shop, and my dad had an acetylene torch and a welder. So when I wanted to make knives, I needed some instruction, but I had a few things to at least get going. But so many kids nowadays living in apartments, or they live in suburbia, in a small home, and their dad works in an office. Uh, and they don't have that opportunity. And I think that's unfortunate. And I honestly don't know. This is a way bigger conversation and how we rectify that situation and provide more opportunity. But man, you take a kid and you teach him how to weld for 2 or 3 weekends in a row. You never know that kid takes off, and 30 years later, he's a nuclear power plant welder. Like, who knows? It's important.
Yeah, exactly. And I do agree with you there that it's not just like if you have kids, obviously pay attention to your children, be present for your children, and expose them to things that maybe even you weren't interested in at that age, or maybe you just didn't have the opportunity to be interested in at that age. And when you see a little spark ignite, help them. You don't have to go all in 100% and just beat them into the dirt with that one thing, but provide those opportunities. Find a good coach for them if you don't know how to do it, things like that. And I've noticed, so bring up our 15-year-old. He's actually just turned 16. uh I know nothing about coding, and I know that that's what the way the world is going with technology. And man, he submitted some project that out of like 2 or 3 thousand submissions in the world, he got like eighth. And it was some
Wow.
game that he had to code, and he had me play this game. And it was like, some typing game. I don't know the name of it, but you type out your answers to certain questions, and it walks you through rooms and things like that. And I'm sitting here like, I'm chewing you out about not having the good enough grades. I need to back off a little bit and provide some more opportunity for something that will be your future, because you're passionate about it and you can make money off of it. You can make a career out of it. Let's go for it. And so finding those things is key as a parent. But then also, if you don't have kids, or you are a coach, just like what you were saying, or you're in a community with children, and they start to show interest in certain things, get those parents involved and let them know what the process is, and then bring those kids and encourage that, because it definitely is. There's a lot of impact that can happen by volunteering to be a coach, or volunteering at your local, Boy Scouts or young men's organizations at your church, things like that, that can change lives, obviously,
Right.
with yours, Um, so I think that's really awesome. That's a very
Yeah,
good
and I
point.
think your point is really really well taken. Much like my parents with knife making, you know, my parents knew nothing about knife making. You know nothing about coding. I know nothing about coding. Um, but just because it's not our interest, it's one thing to just sit around and play video games all the time, but there's a whole nother level to that of like with the coding stuff and the computer technologies and stuff that guys like you and I, I was trying to figure out how to sign on to a Riverside FM to do a podcast with you. I mean, that's my level of expertise on a computer. So when it comes to coding, I have no idea. But clearly, with the way this world is heading, there's so much stuff in the technology space that kids are into these days that none of us have any idea about. I mean, I remember even when I was graduating high school, there's a couple of guys that were just really good at building websites, and I remember kind of being like, "Oh, that's kind of cool, I guess," but I don't understand the point of it. And next thing you know, look at what the world is. And so, uh, to your point, saying like, hey, I don't know anything about that, but I'm going to help that kid. Like if that kid says there's some coding convention, much like the Atlanta Blade Show was for knife making, hey, there's a convention in Atlanta. And I live in Montana. Well, my mom flew to the Atlanta Blade Show with me. And we were not, and I want to point this out, like we definitely were not wealthy people. This was all I had to pay for my own trip with my lawn mowing money. um my mom went down there when I tested for my journeyman. I went to knife shows just with those other knife makers, just in the back of their car, and take $50 for meals back then and sleep on the floor in the hotel room. Like that's how I did it. But you don't have to be wealthy to make it happen. But I think it's what's more important. I think to your kid is that you're showing support for their passion and their dream. When I look back at it, it is pretty amazing. Like this kind of being my idea, my thing I want to do, and the fact that my parents had that support. Now they also used it against me. Uh, it they threat my dad threatened me with a padlock with my knife shop door of like, hey, you get caught drinking, you get caught doing drugs, like you're not going to see your knife shop for 6 months. Like, and my dad was not a yeller, never heard him. I've still never ever heard him yell, but he was dead freaking serious. And he would have set a timer for 6 months, and it probably would have been 6 months and a day. you know
Yep.
so it kept me on the straight and narrow, much like your boy. It's like, hey, got to take your computer away. You're not gonna be allowed to do any coding for 6 months. Well, it could be a good tool as a parent to kind of keep a kid in check too.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, there's always that fine line, that balance that we have to walk as parents. It's not for the faint of heart. It sucks sometimes because you have to remind your kids that you're not their best friend, you're a parent first, and then if they follow those rules, then you can be their friend. It's definitely not always easy. But no, I agree. It's really cool that you can look back and see that now. And then on top of that, let's talk about our spouses just for a minute here, because that's something else that blows me away. And anytime I see you and Jess, I'm just like, that's a power couple right there. Because the fact that when you were like, hey, I think, you were talking about doing this and that, and she was just like, yeah, quit your job, go do it. And you're like, whoa, hold on. Like,
Yeah.
and the fact that she's willing to go all in on that with you, and I try and give my wife shout out. She doesn't like to be in the spotlight at all. But just talking about how I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if it wasn't for her, because we have kids. I'd be able to do some of it, but the majority of my travel and things like that, I wouldn't be able to do if she wasn't willing to. Like this weekend, I'm going to Elk Shape Camp in Wisconsin to go help volunteer up there at the camp. And, who's got the kids? Well, she has to arrange with her work that she's going to work from home Thursday and Friday. And then over the weekend, she had some stuff she was wanting to do. And we've organized so that she can have the kids there as well. So it's huge to, again, surrounding yourself with people that want you to be better and also being willing to put those deposits back into their accounts or their cups to be able to fill them up. So you know, what I heard about you and Jess, I kind of already knew a little bit, but the fact that she's so willing to just go all in and support everything,
Yeah.
even though she's not a knife maker, she's not all about knives, but she sees your passion and wants you to succeed. I mean, that I can only imagine that's been key for your success as well.
Oh yeah, I was a single dad of 4 kids when I met her. So I mean, I was making a knife a little bit here and there on a weekend, but I mean, I was just kind of in it as far as the family goes. So this was definitely not a reality that was going to come true. And then as soon as I kind of told her, like you said, I told her my idea and my dream, she was just like, let's do it. And she did, like, right off the bat was like, you should quit your job and go back making knives full time and make this all happen. And like you say, I was like, hold on, like, I have a good job right now. That would be a little crazy. But the point is that support was there. And then as we got into it more, that support continued. And, not a lot different than like your wife and you coming up here to my event. She went with me to that first Winter Strong event where I met a lot of people. That was somewhat of the, I guess some of the gas to the fire or to the spark. Um, and much like probably with the podcast, right in the beginning, it's not like there's like lots of money being made from it, and it's more of a dream, and it's something that you have to build, and you need support. And by her being willing to come along, or like your wife being willing to come along to our event, like, who knows who you meet at that event in Montana when you come up, and who knows what lead goes to the next lead. And that's my attitude with it all along, has been, hey, we're going to go to Total Archery Challenge. Like, I don't know why, I don't know who we're going to meet, I don't know where it's going to go, but something probably will good come of something there, right? And that belief in that support in that, is huge for sure. And sometimes it's very, very direct support with the actual business. Maybe for you, it's a helping book a guest or something. But then I think more importantly is that support on the family side, like you were saying with the kids, of knowing that, like for me, for example, in May, I'm going bear hunting with, John Dudley up in British Columbia, and I'm going to be gone for a week. And, uh, you know, she's in full support of me going up there and being away. And in a way, it's like, she could easily be somebody saying like, why are you going bear hunting? Like, there's all this other stuff that we have to be doing with the business. But it's like, no, this is part of building the brand. It's brand relationships, you know, all that stuff. And then instead of being, um, kind of opposing that, she's just in full support, and, yeah, and it's cool because in the end, like, she was in full support, and she was a school teacher, and she was still going to school every day when I had quit my job, and I was here every day. And then we got to the point where then I was able to have her quit her job and come work for us. And now she's fully uh, invested in everything we're doing, and on meetings, and stressed out, and she's running her department. And it's actually kind of funny. We're 2 office doors apart. And like yesterday, I think I saw her twice. We're both so busy. It's crazy. So, but it's cool. It feels like we're building it together.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I agree. It's definitely one of those things where, and I kind of got that vibe from her because I even asked while you were forging that jelly roll. I was like, I bet you're extremely just, um, what was it? Excited to watch him make another knife or forge something. And she's like, honestly, I don't really like this. I don't really watch him do it. I love that he's passionate about it. Tell him to go do it. And I love that answer from her because that's how she comes off. And then there was a post that you put up. I can't remember where you guys were traveling, but she was answering emails while you were driving. It was late at night.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I actually sent an email and I didn't realize it was going to her while you guys were in Hawaii. I thought there was someone else answering email. She answered me back. I was like, well, Jess, stop. Like, not in Hawaii. Like, you go and enjoy that. I'm not going to respond anymore until you get back because it really doesn't stop. But it was cool to see that, Like she's taken on that role so that you can again take all your efforts and focus on what you're really good at. And then again, you've built out that network of people and continue to grow. You know, you've got a marketing guy, you've got people that are putting together the sheaths, you've got people that are, you know, wrapping the blades. You've got all of these things going on that you can focus on what you're really good at. And then you trust these people. You're able to let go of some of that control of being a business owner, the knife maker, and let them do what they do really well.
Right.
I think that's awesome.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, we were coming home from a just a kids basketball game, but that's how you have to do it as well as we're doing as a company, as much as we're growing. Like there's still that like you know you have to put that time and that work in. And I remember my dad coming home from a long day doing excavation work in the summer, and my folks sitting up till 11 o'clock at night, doing the billing. My dad explaining to my mom, uh, what he did that day and how much pipe he used, and the amount of gravel that he hauled, and that way she could put the bill together. And so it feels similar. We're still having these super late nights, and you would actually be amazed. You were just here, but like I'll actually post some photos. But I was out late last night on my backhoe tearing up a bunch of my kind of circle area out here, my grass, because we have to expand some parking to put more employee parking and stuff. But like that's the stuff you do after work, right? Instead of hiring somebody, I'm renting an excavator next week and hauling my own gravel. And it's weird because I don't know. I actually kind of dread the day that our company would be so big that I'm not involved on a micro level like that. Um, I really enjoy that stuff, and I think it's just because we did grow up blue collar, and um, that's the stuff I love. I'd rather hire more executives and keep like more down into the bottom side of my company if I can help it. But yeah,
Yeah. No, definitely. And then the other thing too that I saw, and I love that you guys, either you or Jess or Brandon, you guys post these little glimpses into things. I think Jess took a video of you after the weekend, everyone left, and you were cleaning the floor, prepping it for Monday. Like that just again just speaks to, and you didn't ask her to take this video. Like it was very obvious you were tuned into what you were doing, and she just wanted to post that clip because it really does show again that you are passionate about this. You're not some dude in a suit and tie or someone that tucks himself away and doesn't do anything except for the one thing. Like you don't do what you don't expect from your employees. There's another company, you know, I work with First Phorm and First Phorm Outdoors. Andy Frisell is that same way. You know, he's like everyone, like he fired the janitors. They don't have janitors at the building. And that building was as clean as probably the day that they opened when I went and saw headquarters. All the weights were just lined up perfectly. 90 degrees from the floor was the numbers. Like everything was perfect. You use the bathroom, you wash your hands, you dry out the sink. Like it just blew me away how clean it was. And that's because he walks that lifestyle. He does those things. And so he expects the employees to do it, but he leads by example. You know, there's great companies like your company that are built on that. And I don't see you ever shifting, you know, and the fact that
no,
you're so willing to be humble and still going clean and not have one of your kids just do it, right? You're out there
yeah,
participating. It's amazing.
he's uh he's somebody I'd actually like to meet. I, I I would love to chat with him. I mean, yes, he's got the podcast. That would be cool. But like more than anything, uh, he's actually somebody when back in 2020, when I started MKC, if you remember, that's when we were diving straight off into COVID, like head first, triple gainer right off the diving board into COVID. And I was starting this. And uh, I came home from Winterstrong that year of February, and on the way out and on the way back, COVID was like being rumored. That was the first weekend in February. Oh, 2 weeks later, it was the only thing on TV 24 hours a day, and I was coming back from that event like ready to like go after it with my company, all full of excitement, energy, and piss and vinegar. And while I was in making prototypes, I had his podcast on, and I actually didn't know anything about him or didn't know about Priscilla or First Form until late 2019. It was actually Brandon, my business partner, uh, that was like, "Hey, you should listen to this guy." And so I started listening to him, and then I was listening to him into 2020. And so the whole time I'm like, "Gosh, I'm working this job. I want to start this company, but shit, the world's about to fall apart." And everything he was talking about on his podcast back then was exactly how I felt about what was happening. And I don't need to go down the rabbit hole of the vaccine and all that. That wasn't actually the topic back then. It was more like shutdowns, right? Shutting down your business and
Mm-hmm.
shutting down your life. And he said something that really resonated back then, was that there's going to be some people that like pull back and take a wait and see approach, and they're going to be like, boy, I don't know, this is scary, like what if this happens, what if that happens, and they're going to pause on their dreams. And in very colorful language, he's like, there's going to be the rest of us that put the hammer down and go full steam ahead all the way through this deal with no looking back. And when this is all said and done, we're going to look back on that 2-year time period, and some of us are going to have won and others of us are going to have regrets, right? And here we sit in the beginning of 23, and I didn't have a company the day COVID started, quite frankly. And I didn't have a website, didn't have nothing. And here we sit. And so that's something that I want to get across to him, that like he was a big it's not that I wasn't having those thoughts already. It's exactly how I felt. It was confirmation that somebody else that had succeeded thought the same thing. And that was pretty emboldening and empowering, and supported like my thoughts. And I've seen, them doing the Pledge of Allegiance before work, and some of the way that, with the building they built. And um, I really I think that's a model that I've somewhat tried to emulate with what Andy's done. So it's interesting you brought him up, because he's actually somebody on the celebrity front, like quote unquote. I don't really give a shit about celebrities. I've met some celebrities that I thought were kind of douchebags, quite frankly, and then I met other people like you alluded to, Derek Wolf, that was a star football player that just was super cool guy that came and stayed in my house and didn't ask for a bunch of celebrity treatment. He just flew in. I picked him up. He just hung out like you would, right? But Andy's one of those quote unquote celebrities I actually would like to meet, just to kind of talk about that stuff, because we're so aligned on that, and I think it's cool with his messaging. And he ended up being right on pretty much everything he talked about. You know,
Yeah, no, I agree. It's one of those things where, and he talks a lot about it. And it was funny because my wife turned me onto his podcast, and she's she's definitely not as boisterous upfront like he is, and she doesn't really listen to the podcast very often. But back in when it was the MF CEO project before Relay F, is when she was like, "Hey, you've got that entrepreneur mindset. This one I've heard lines up with it." And the first couple podcasts, I was kind of like, this is really kind of rough. Like, I don't mind swear words, but like, oh man. And then, but once I got through like 2 episodes, yeah, I've listened to every single episode that he's put out, and I agree. Where it was cool to hear him say, "Look, basically control the controllables. You can't control what the politicians are going to do. You can't control what anyone else is going to do about this. What are you going to do about it? Do
right?
you want to sit back, and the world's going to get, time's never going to come back. Like, that's one thing that's not renewable. So what are you going to do with this time? Who knows if it's really going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be 6 months? Is it going to be a year? Who knows? But I love the fact that the people that, like you said, put the hammer down and stuck to their beliefs, stuck to what they truly wanted to do, and you jumping in, like saying, "Okay, well, everyone's shutting down. I'm going to build knives. I'm going to make this, MKC thing a thing now." You doubled down, and it's so true that you look back and there's so many companies that didn't take advantage of that time to be able to connect with people, and that's really what you've done really well, what your company's done well, and the companies that succeeded through, obviously people suffered, unfortunately, but as far as business goes, people genuinely crave connection. And that's something that through COVID, a lot of people were losing. There were people that weren't even able to watch or be there with their loved ones when people died in the hospital.
Yeah, it's
That
insane.
level of yeah, and that level of disconnection, it's interesting. People talk to me about, how have you done so well, with the podcast or social media. I'm like, honestly, I just answer every single message. I talk to people. I answer with video messages. I may not know this person from Adam, but I that's all people want. And that's what you guys, going back to Montana Knife Company, that's what you've done is you've formed that connection. You've related to people. You make funny jokes like the broadhead thing. That was amazing. Like, I can't even tell you how many people messaged me. They're like, "Man, this is gonna be awesome." I was like, "Yeah, I got to see him in person up at the grand opening. This thing's gonna be sweet," and just not being able to tell people, it was really funny. But you guys might actually have to do that now because there was so much demand for it.
I had a guy on the phone last night. He's kind of an older guy, that's not real social media savvy, and maybe he only saw like the first part of the video, but he was asking me last night if it was. He's like, "Is that what's the deal with that broadhead? Like, is that something? Is it really work or whatever?" And I was like, "Dude, it was an April Fool's joke." That was a good one, and I got to give all the credit to Nosler on that one. John Nason at Nosler really spun that idea up and involved us, and that was a blast. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, and I agree. It's funny, back then my wife listened to a lot of Priscilla's, and the same thing. She would listen to one and she'd come to me and she'd like, and we don't have the cleanest language around our house. Jess and I definitely cuss a little bit, but she always would come to me and be like, "God, I wish you would just tone it back a little bit." She's like, "His language." She's like, "I can't take it." But you know, you could have the same feeling about Rogan a little bit on not net, maybe language a little bit more of like some of the drug stuff or some of the
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like when you're a pretty conservative person, I've never really done any drugs. Yeah, I'm pretty conservative guy, though I'm not super judgmental on it. It's just not what I've done. Um, Point is if you listen to the message and you get past that, boy, there's some really powerful messages in there, whether it's Joe Rogan, with a guest, or it's Andy. Um, you can miss a really powerful message by get caught up on a few words. So, and I'm always interested to see how people got successful and how they made it, especially in a blue collar way. Back in 2020, I remember while I was working in that little tiny shop that you saw here, him talking about the days of first form in the warehouse, sitting around with two guys or one guy and like literally nothing to do and nobody coming in. Like I remember those. And, being somewhat friendly with Jared Connell, and Jared being there in those early days and being offered a job and going to Andy, he told me this, and Andy said, "Hey man, do what you got to do, but I can promise you this is going to be something." And he's like, "I don't know why, but against all odds, like I didn't take the job and I just stuck with first form." And he's like, had no real reason as to why, other than I think he believed in Andy and believed in what they were doing. And it worked out.
Exactly. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
look
There,
at that
there's
with our young employees actually right now. We have a couple from day one, like Tristan here. I'm like, "Hey man, you're gonna have to eat a lot of shit for a while. Like, there's just a lot of repetitive jobs of making a knife over and over that need done. But like, I promise you, like, you stick with us, and if you learn, um, you're gonna move up, and there will be a day down the road that you're gonna be an executive at this company at a big outdoor brand, and you're going to look back and remember those days in that little shop." And obviously he's not to the executive spot yet, but he is getting leadership things given to him,
hmm
and we are following through on his pay scale going up, and him being made responsible for more and more things. And um I think that's critical. I have a strong belief in like raising people from inside. And yes, we're for sure looking to hire some people. We need to install some knowledge in places immediately. Um, but ultimately, culture wise, I believe in growing your employees from the ground up. Even my
Right.
director of operations, I hired him away from Amazon. The first thing I made him do for the first 2 weeks is work in the shop under all the people that were going to report to him. And he had to do what they told him to do. He had to bead blast, and he had to sand and grind and tie paracord, and for the first 2 weeks, everybody that he was going to be the boss of was his boss. You know, do what they say, no questions asked. Um, so it gave him though a full understanding of one of the people and two of the process.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. That's awesome. That's such a good way to build the company. So, just kind of to wrap up here, uh, I know you've got a hard stop here in about 10 minutes, but first off, you've finally convinced me that a fixed blade is a good carry option. So I've been stuck on folders obviously since probably my Cub Scout days, right? They're easy to fit, but this little guy
Yeah,
blows me away.
really.
The fact how it can fit so deep in your pocket that's the only thing that sticks up. Like you guys have you smashed it out of the park with this one. What would be if you had to pick one kind of overall knife? What would be your favorite blade?
Yeah, well, first of all, to the everyday carry, yeah, I mean, we have the goal of making a folding knife. It's a big process. I'm looking over to my left here right now at the prototype CAD drawing that's here to my left. So it's happening, but it's still going to be some time. So folders are handy for sure. But to your point, that knife that you just held up it weighs less than most folders. It's smaller than a lot of folders. Um, it's quickly deployable. There's a lot of things that are good about it. And I'll never argue that there's no place for folders, but it definitely is a good way to go. From a standpoint of like my favorite knife, I don't know if my answer will ever change on this, and I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing or what. But when I went to build this company, I could only really afford to cut enough blades to make one pattern, and I designed a knife that I thought could kind of cut across every potential thing that you needed to do in every situation, and it would work everywhere from somewhat tactical as far as just carrying it and having a blade, uh, self-defense wise, to more so hunting, fishing, bird and trout, elk, deer, moose, didn't matter. And that's our Blackfoot. uh, that knife is, probably a little bit too big to try to carry in your pocket. Um, but it's a knife that if it was on your belt every single day and you were forced to wear it every single day, it wouldn't be cumbersome. It wouldn't be really in the way. It would come in handy for, I don't care if you're opening boxes or if you're going on a moose hunt. Um, you can cape with it. You can skin with it. It's got a hard handle on it. It can take some abuse. It's not a pry bar, but you can also do delicate work. So, uh, that Blackfoot was made for a reason. It's called the Blackfoot because I wanted to do anything in the Blackfoot Valley. I grew up in the Blackfoot River Valley, fished on the Blackfoot River. It went right behind our house, about a half a mile. Um, that's the knife I could put on my pack or in my fishing kit or whatever and go do anything. Or my buddy could put it on his belt and go ride and check cows and cut bale strings. Like it does everything.
That's awesome. Yeah, that was the first one I picked up was the Blackfoot. And I'm a sucker for that orange and black. And then
Yeah.
I recently got was the last, no, it was at the Western Hunt Expo, the Stonewall Magna Cut. That steel, like I love the black and orange look. That's all my blades are black and orange from you guys.
Yeah.
But the Magna Cut steel, I can see that being an amazing steel to use. I have yet to put it in the field yet, but having that stainless and just how it doesn't even really pick up like thumbprints. It's
Yeah.
crazy, super
That's
slick.
uh that's a phenomenal steel. It really is. I think you're going to love it. Um, I'm working on a mini goat in that, but that's going to be later in the year. Well, I have These are all blades I have to go hand grind. Uh, Whoops, dropped them on the computer. These are all mini goat blades that I got cut that I'm going to go grind by hand and test
Hmm.
in my shop to test edge thickness, spine thickness. So that's kind of part of the process, right? Of taking a blade like this, that's a stainless mini goat, and putting it through the paces before we put it in production. So that's still how we do things around here. We don't have a big team of engineers. That's me and my belt grinder, and put it through some abuse.
That's awesome.
So
Well, sweet. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up there, guys. You know his favorite Blackfoot blade. Go pick one of those up, guys. If you're out there listening, it's one of my favorites as well. I love the G10 handles. It's just long enough that you can get some work done with it, but it's also not a ginormous blade that you're going to be, out there skinning like your bear tooth or any of the other bigger blades. So go check them out, guys. And then Josh, where can they find you?
yeah, Montana Knife Company is our main page. I have my own Instagram, Josh Smith Knives. I'm the only one checking my DMs and stuff there. I try to be fairly responsive on that. Our Montana Knife Company website. I do appreciate you having me on, man. I apologize for kind of the hard out today, but more than anything, I'd love to come back on. I respect what you're doing, the way you're building your brand, kind of from the ground up. Frankly, like we did our company. I've been paying attention to some of your content, what you're doing, and I think it's interesting. I just kind of relaunched my podcast, and the numbers right now aren't huge on it, right? And there was some discussion here of like, why isn't it bigger, and what do we need to do to make it bigger? And I'm like, hey, I'm not worried about it. Like, it's consistency, right? And it's about choosing the right people to be on it for the right reasons, letting the podcast breathe and build the way it needs to build, and no artificial growth to it. We're not in the podcast business. So the podcast, we don't even have advertisers. So there's no way it's going to make money anyway. It's just something I enjoy doing because of the people side. And so I think what you're doing is really cool. And I'd be happy to come back on if you want to have me down the road. Invite me on anytime. We can chat hunting or whatever. So I feel like I'm cutting you a little short today, but
no knives and no hunting.
yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, you heard it here. Josh is just an outstanding human being. I'm going to leave all the links down below. You guys go check him out. Whatever the recent drop is, this will be coming out in a couple weeks. I'm sure there's going to be some drop coming up because you guys do great work with those. Check it out, and I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your weekend. And of course, get out, live your life, and love it.